Okay, so what does that mean for your club? Let's just explore that a little bit more, particularly in light of where our district stands at the moment. Now, I don't know, how many of you are aware, how many of you know or were involved in applications for district grants on behalf of your clubs this year? Some of you were. How many of you got rejected? Yep, some of you did. Unfortunately, Michael Irvin did a great job this year, I think, with Andy, and the district grants were oversubscribed. Unfortunately, we were not able to put as much money back into the clubs through the district grant program as we would have liked. 3 years ago, had more clubs put more money into the foundation, we would have been able to put more money back into the clubs. We couldn't, and that meant that the likes of you who didn't get grants in this instance, it was because there wasn't enough money in the kitty to go around. Similarly, our global grant funding is at risk each year in the future because we're doing more of this type of activity, making people more aware. The money is getting taken up. What does that mean? It means that you need to go back to your clubs thinking about what I told you a minute or two ago and thinking about how you have a strategy for the future to make use of the foundation. So you're going to have to start thinking about putting money into the foundation each year so that in 3 years' time, you know you can come back and pretty much say, we put money in 3 years ago, we jolly well deserve to get some money out, we want some money, and we want to get involved in projects in our community using foundation funds. And by doing that, particularly if you go for a global grant, you're going to get the benefit of the multiplier effect. So not only are you going to get back what you put in, ideally you're going to get back more. That's really important for you to take back to your clubs too. And there's two parts to it. There's putting money in, and then there's coming back to get money out. And if you don't put the money in, you can't expect to come back and get the money out. Now, some of you are great supporters of the foundation. Some of you have always put money in. I know my club is probably heading towards a $100,000 mark of putting money in. And I don't say that to boast. I say that because the members have always thought we've got to make sure that we support our local charity. And a number of clubs here I know, particularly on the Gold Coast, have been great supporters. Also in New South Wales, I know, have been great supporters. But you've got to keep doing that in order to access the money. So in order to look forward and to move forward in a way that I'm describing today, you've got to remember the two-part strategy. Put the money in, but then remember each year to come back. But if you're putting money in, expect to come back in 3 years' time to access that money and ideally more. But have that mindset at your board meetings, have that mindset as you approach every new year, every new Rotary year, so that the foundation can work for your club and link it back to those service activities. Those are a couple of things that I really want you to take away today. And we're going to do some work a little bit later to help you to think about global grants. But as you're thinking about those global grants and as you think about district grants, think about this part too. If you don't put the money in, you can't expect to get it out. Okay, let's look very briefly at grants. We're going to dive into them more in a little while. We are going to spend a little bit of time today. And Glenn, what's my time at the moment, just out of interest?
15 minutes.
15 minutes, okay. We're going to look at district grants first. They are, I think many of you are aware of them. We've had a number of hands up who have applied for them. They're small-scale, short-term types of activities. Normally done in fact, they have to be done generally in the Rotary year. We did have an anomaly towards the end of the last Rotary year where COVID got in the way and prevented us from doing or finishing some of our projects. But by and large, they are local or international projects that happen in the Rotary year, and they have pretty simple requirements. First of all, your club needs to match what you're asking for from the district in terms of funds. So if you want $1,000 from a district, you need to put $1,000 in as a club. You must involve Rotarians in some way. Now that doesn't mean that you've got to go out and build something. It doesn't mean you've got to go out and have all of your club members doing something as a service. It can actually mean fundraising in the first instance, getting the name out. It doesn't matter how you involve the Rotarians, you just need to have more than one person applying for a district grant, going through a paper exercise and getting funds in the bank. You need to get your club involved. The other important thing is on a district grant is you can't go and implement the activity before you've been awarded the grant. If you do, you won't be able to spend the money you get won't be able to compensate yourselves as clubs for the work you've already paid for. As I said before, they have to be completed with the same year, and they should include some kind of recognition of the fact that the foundation has supported the project that you have asked for the funds for. Now, in some instances, you can't put up signage. In some instances, you've just got to publicise the fact that it's happened, but you need to get that recognition out there. But that's pretty much all it is. You can do it locally. You can certainly support your local community. You can go and do something overseas if you want. And I certainly encourage you to do it. The approximate size of most grants is somewhere between 1,000 and 5,000 Aussie. And not normally more than that. If we put more money in, we can probably get more money out, like I said before. Okay, let's have a quick look, and we'll do this before the break. Let's have a quick look at, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to have a look at an example of a poor district grant application, and I hope I have covered up in here who the club is, because I don't want to shame them. The intention of this was not to do that. In doing this, we're actually going to also just have a look at what the application form is on a grant, on a district grant. It's fairly simple, but it does need to be filled in correctly. Now, I've got to say that for those of us who've done the assessment of district grant applications before, you almost start to feel like a school teacher, because some of what you get in, you go, and we'll take this as a great example. As I said, I hope I've covered up any reference to the club. Now, this club's asking for $4,000. Now, for $4,000, how many of you would expect people to put a little bit of effort into it? I would hope most of you. I mean, how many sausage sizzles do you have to do for a $4,000 revenue stream? A lot. Okay, so filling in a form, give it a little bit of effort. Now, first of all, make it so that it's easy for us to read, and make your own assessment of whether or not you can read that. Answer the questions with enough detail so that we can actually go, this is great, we want to support it. If you don't put enough information in there, and I'm not going to go through the detail of this specifically, but the first question that you see up there is, it says, give us a detailed project description. There are 4 lines to that response. How on earth can we tell what your project is up to on 4 lines? I'll leave it at that. The next requirement is for you to basically tell us what you have done to assess the need within your community. Now again, I'm not sure if you can read that, and it doesn't matter if you can't. The first sentence on there, after having been asked to detail the community assessment that your club's undergone, is to go, please see attached letter. This is a Word document that allows you to put lots of words in, and you want us as assessors to go and look at an attached letter. Now I think what compounded this at the time was they sent us a letter from, it happened to be St. Vincent de Paul. St. Vincent de Paul had come begging for money. This club had then come asking us for a district grant on the back of that begging letter. Now, again, this district grants are not checkbook exercises. We're not giving out district grants to help another charity. It must be a Rotary project. But if you're not even going to take the time to detail the community assessment that you as a club have done, and you're going to go, well, have a look at the letter that somebody else sent us. Is that sending the right message to somebody who's assessing your grant and determining whether or not we want to give you $4,000? 4 to 8 days worth of sausage sizzles, I would imagine. How long does it take to write 4 sentences? You should be thinking about a day's worth of effort to apply for $4,000, to my mind. Combined, involving a number of members. I'm not suggesting that any of us spend our Sundays applying for a district grant and spend the whole day. But do link the request to the amount of effort you put in. Sustainability, okay? In this instance, the sustainability you should be telling us as clubs how the project that you are asking the funds for will be sustaining the community under the Rotary banner. And this response here said, well, St. Paul de Vincent. And that's all it says, basically. It's not, again, helping anybody. Okay? Implementation plan and timetable. I'm not sure about you, but I don't see one in this response. I see reference to something else, somebody else's letter, Not only that, but I see page 2 of the letter, second last paragraph. Now, are you helping me to assess your project or anybody else? Are you helping any of the assessors? Or are you getting this thing done as quickly as possible, hopefully to try and get $4,000? Okay, project budget, not too bad. One slight problem, there's 2 parts to the financials. There's what is your budget, and you don't have to get too carried away on that one. And then there's the expected expenses. Now, the expenses are listed out there. It's not that easy to read, but they are listed out there. Now, I'm an accountant by background. I also am pretty good at maths. When I add up the budget and I compare it to, and Graham, our professor of mathematics there, is laughing away already, add up the expected income and compare it to the expected expenses, the 2 don't match. Now, if you're presenting a request for a grant and you can't match your numbers, does that send the message that you can control your budget or your grant? Probably not. So the sum of, and in fact, not only that, I'm not sure if you can read it again because it is pretty difficult. In brackets, probably the top third, we think that one of the other Rotary clubs is going to give us between $500 and $1,000. Now, that's not very helpful either. You either need to know what's happening or you need to get rid of that statement. So you've got an expected amount of somewhere between, $8,000 or $9,000, and you're planning to spend, I think I added up $10,500. Not really supporting the cause of asking for the money. Okay, so that's a not so good example of a grant application. Now I have, in this instance, I've left the names on here, partly because they're not here. So they can't walk out of here with an enhanced ego. Can everyone see this? First of all, is that easier to read already? Okay, now they're only asking for $3,000. They're actually asking for less than the other one. All right, the detailed project description. I don't want you to read that, okay? But first, all I want you to take away is they've already started, they've got 3 paragraphs there. Not only do they have 3 paragraphs on the introduction, they've got a picture. All right, now you can't see what that is there, but they had a problem with tank traps. Out in Tenterfield, they've got this marvelous community initiative. They're retaining some history in their community. They're showing us some of the problems associated with that. They haven't finished with their detailed project description yet. They've got another 3 paragraphs and another photo and another paragraph. Okay, so they're asking for $3,000. Do you think they've put $3,000 worth of effort into this? Certainly a lot more than the other one. Then have they done a community assessment and community impact? Well, again, we don't need to go through the detail. The first impressions count. Already we're going, okay, these guys have spent some time. They've put some effort into this. It looks to me, without even reading the detail, and when you read the detail, it is good, they've clearly done their homework. They were ravaged by bushfires, so this was another problem which they're presenting to us. Okay, so where are we now? I can't see. So we've got to page 4.5, and they've told us about the project. It's not hard to get excited about their project when they've put that kind of effort into their application. It's pretty much as simple as that. Now, what does that mean? It means you've got to find somebody who's good at writing grants. Now, in Tenterfield, they've got somebody who does that as a job every day in the club. She happened to be a president at the time, but that doesn't matter. They found the right person to fill in the form, and that's how you involve members in your club. Not as the president or as the chair of your foundation committee. Get into your club and find someone who's good at this stuff, including good at dealing with the IT aspects of it. Because it's much easier to read a well-presented presentation that's been put together on a computer than somebody who's scribbled on a bit of paper. We've even had photos of applications where we've had to open up one file at a time to put the whole thing together. Not again helping your cause. Okay, sustainability. A couple of clauses on there about how they as a club are going to maintain this project after the money has been spent. Implementation plan and timetable. Already I know their plan and timetable is going to be good because they've already put that impression into me before they've even got to this section. Project budget. The numbers add up. As simple as that. They haven't got that complicated. If we need to know more as an assessment committee, we will go and ask them. But at least they're giving us confidence already. They've also told us about other people they're going to draw in the community to help them in this instance. Now, that's not necessarily going to happen in all of the projects that you might get involved in for a district grant. But I'd say, let's just do an assessment here. Do you think that one was better than the first one? Vastly better? It's the likes of, the people who are assessing these grants are the same, whether it's me, Glenn, Michael, district governor, we're all in the same boat. You could all do the same thing and go, yep, and form the same conclusions. So when you're putting in an application, have that mindset. As a Rotary Foundation chair or a president in your club, you should be assessing the application, not preparing it. Global grants, large long-term projects. You can apply for them at any time in the year. The minimum budget, so when we say a large project, the minimum budget has to be $30,000 US. That doesn't mean you as a club have to put that money in. It means the spend on that project must be roughly 50,000 Aussie. There must be sustainable, measurable outcomes on your global grant. And we're going to look at that a lot more after the break. They must be linked to the areas of focus. I spoke about them already. And you do need an international partner on your global grant. I spoke about it before and I'll mention again. If you do a global grant, you get the benefit of the multiplier effect. Right, how long have we got? Where are we at, Glenn?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. All right, we might run a couple of minutes over, and when we get to the tea break, I'll reiterate it then. Keep it as short as we can, because I want us to get back and actually get into the detail of actually experiencing what it's like to apply for a global grant. Let's have a look at a few successful global grants around the world. Now, I've taken this from the Rotary International website. So you can go, if you want to remember any of this, go and Google successful Rotary Foundation grants. There's 15 of them listed here and 15 of them listed on the website. I'm just going to give you a couple of the names, and then I'm going to look very briefly at the detail of 2 of them. So I'm not going to read every single word here. You can see the types of projects that are happening out there around the world. And when you look at those project names, you can see the areas of focus are by and large obvious from the project title. So these are just project titles that have happened and locations. Look at a few more. Peace solving there. Clean water. Again, water, sanitation and hygiene. Again, sanitation, literacy, screening for breast cancer, medical again, cervical cancer. This one I'm going to touch on in a minute, but I just want you to register where that district grant happened. We're going to look at it a bit more. All the rest of them have happened in third world countries. That one happened in the United States of America. Now, some of you might argue that they need a lot of help at the moment. Let's look at the first one. So this was on one of those lists, providing safe water for rural communities in Peru. Now the area of focus, I think, is pretty obvious. The total budget, now that's a pretty big project. That's probably 450,000 Aussie. A big project. You can see very briefly the background before that project. You've got kids and elderly people particularly who are drinking untreated, unclean water. That's impacting the medical health of that entire community. The project was intended to address that issue. In all of your global grants, you've got to think about what the issue is before you think about what the solution is. So what did they do? They went in and they repaired 32 reservoirs. They spent some time making sure that the water was clean so that the residents of the community could drink it. And they also spent some time making sure that this solution was sustainable. They trained the residents to administer and maintain the system. They didn't just go and dump something in there. And this is a great example. I saw this, I grew up in Zimbabwe in the middle of Africa. Things changed there. We had a time where we had a lot of non-government organizations coming in and saying, help the poor community. I particularly remember the Swedes coming in, dumping wells all over the country in rural areas where the poor people had to go and walk for miles to go and get water from a river. The Swedes thought they were going to solve all their problems by dumping the best wells and the best pumping equipment in those communities. They built the wells, left the place. 2 months later, the locals broke the pumping equipment because they didn't know how to use it. And then what happened? They couldn't maintain it. Nobody trained them. Nobody helped them to think about the long-term sustainability of that project. So what did they do? They went straight back to the river, unfortunately. So when you go into an area where you are going to implement a project under a global grant, make sure that when you walk away, that community can look after whatever it is that you have left them, and that they can look after it permanently. It's really important. How much did they help with that $258,000 US? 10,000 people, including over 1,000 people under the age of 4. Simple, it was actually a simple project, but it was a lot of work, there was a lot of money, and the impact was huge. Now let's look at one that really most of us would never think about, because it applies to us here in Australia. The area of focus was fighting disease. Where was it? New York State. Who was the international sponsor? Zambia. Zambia was my neighbor when I grew up in Zimbabwe. Zambia is not the richest country in the world. They were the international sponsor. By and large, we think about ourselves as international sponsors to the poor old PNG or Solomon Islands or anywhere like that. You don't always have to go that way. You can get people from places like Zambia. We have very good Rotarians in a lot of countries who are looking to support projects even in first world countries. The budget was less, it doesn't matter. It was still big enough to do a global grant. What happened? We had kids with cleft craniofacial abnormalities. They couldn't access treatment close to home. They had to travel a long way to get to the treatment. The clubs there said, how can we do something in our local community? It was basically medical equipment being put into a local community, doctors trained, specialists trained, to ensure that once you walked away from that medical equipment as a Rotary club, you were able to leave them running that equipment, helping the local community. And in that instance, there was 15 million people in that community. Now, certainly not 15 million people with cleft craniofacial abnormalities. But this project itself helped a first world community that actually had a problem that was not being solved by local government or local organizations. Something for you to remember as local clubs. I'm not telling you to forget about third world countries and international friends. I'm telling you to think about local as well as international when you think about global grants.